you look at the United States from space at night, the East Coast looks like a civilization that never sleeps. A chain of light, unbroken, stretching from Maine to Miami. Until you get here. This is Dark Geography. In the heart of the fastest growing state in America, there is a void. 300 kilometers of coastline with no cities, no highways, no high-rises, in a state that adds 1,000 new residents every single day. This stretch of land has remained, for 2 centuries, almost completely empty. This is not a national park. It is not a military zone. There is no law that keeps people out. The land does it on its own. The area known as the Big Bend, where Florida's peninsula meets the Panhandle and the Everglades Big Cypress region to the south, represents one of the most anomalous geographic zones in the developed world. Almost 80% of Florida's population lives within 10 miles of the coast. The state has some of the most expensive real estate in the world, and yet, in this specific stretch, the coast has no buyers, no developers, no cities. The most valuable commodity in America, oceanfront land, is sitting empty. The question is not why people haven't moved here. The question is why every attempt to build here has failed. Because they have tried, and the land has answered every time. The Big Bend has more than 300 kilometers of Gulf coastline, one of the longest stretches on the entire US East and Gulf coasts, without a single road running parallel to the shore. The reason is not bureaucratic. It is geological, biological, and climactic. And each of those 3 systems reinforces the others. To understand why nothing gets built here, you have to understand what Florida is made of. Florida is not solid ground. It is a platform of porous limestone calcite rock, dissolved over millions of years by acid groundwater flowing above one of the largest freshwater aquifers on Earth. In most of the state, this creates manageable engineering challenges. In the Big Bend and the Everglades interior, it creates something else entirely. The water table here is not underground. It is in some zones at the surface. To dig a foundation is to dig a well. Sinkholes in this region don't announce themselves. The dissolution process, acid rain filtering through limestone, creating underground voids over decades, produces cavities that can swallow a house in seconds. There are no warning signs, no tremors, no cracks in the walls, just the ground deciding it is done, holding the weight of civilization. Walking through this zone is, technically, walking on the roof of a cathedral made of dissolving crystal. Engineers who have worked in this region describe a specific moment, a calculation they run day one of any project, where the numbers simply stop making sense. Not because the math is wrong, because the ground is. The same substrate that makes the Floridian Aquifer one of the most productive freshwater systems in North America, makes it one of the most hostile foundations for permanent construction in the developed world. The water that sustains 20 million people is also the water that will, given enough time, dissolve everything built above it. But the geology is only the first layer of the problem. Below the surface, a second system makes construction even less viable. In the Everglades and the Big Cypress regions, water does not flow in rivers. It flows in what hydrologists call sheet flow. a slow-moving layer of water, sometimes 60 kilometers wide and just 15 centimeters deep, moving almost invisibly toward the sea. Building a road across this system is not paving a surface. It is building a dam across an ocean with a teaspoon. And the ocean is patient. Assume for a moment you solved the geology, that you built your road on stable pilings, waterproofed your foundation, engineered around the sinkholes. The land has a second system ready for you. Before air conditioning arrived in Florida in the 1950s, the interior of the state was not underdeveloped. It was considered uninhabitable, not by opinion, by the mortality statistics of every group that attempted to settle it. Spanish soldiers lost more men to disease and heat here than to any indigenous resistance. American military campaigns in the 19th century reported that the Everglades killed more troops through tropical illness than combat. The mosquito is not a metaphor here. It is a measurable military force. Historical surveyors of the Big Bend reported cattle dying not from illness, but from anemia and suffocation after exposure to swarms. Modern estimates put mosquito density in deep wetland zones during rainy season at up to 4,000 individuals per square meter. That is not discomfort. That is an ecosystem actively defending its perimeter. The Florida Everglades is the only place on Earth where American alligators and American crocodiles coexist. Add the Burmese python as an invasive apex predator, now estimated to be in tens of thousands, and the Florida panther, one of the most endangered mammals in North America, and you have an ecosystem that is not hostile to human presence. It is simply indifferent to it, which from an evolutionary standpoint is more dangerous. Air conditioning created modern Florida. It did not reach here. The grid is too thin, the roads are too few, and if the electricity went out tomorrow, the land would begin reclaiming what it considers its own within weeks. People have tried to build here. This is important. The emptiness of the Big Bend is not the absence of ambition. It is the record of what ambition looks like when nature refuses to negotiate. Cedar Key, once a thriving 19th century port city, was the western terminus of Florida's first cross-state railroad. At its peak, it processed more timber and seafood than any other Gulf port in the region. Then a hurricane in 1896 erased most of it from the map. Then another in 1950. The permanent population today is under 800 people. The docks are still there. The ambition is not. What Cedar Key represents is not an isolated tragedy. It is a template. The railroad that made it valuable was built in 1861 by David U. Lee, Florida's first U.S. Senator, a man who staked his political legacy on the idea that the Gulf Coast of Florida could be tamed into commerce. The line connected Fernandina Beach on the Atlantic side to Cedar Key on the Gulf. It was, for its moment, an engineering achievement. For 17 years it worked. Then the storms came. Then the timber ran out. Then the railroad rerouted north, toward Jacksonville, toward cities that did not require rebuilding every decade. That is the economic logic that has repeated itself along this coastline for 2 centuries. Capital arrives, capital calculates, capital leaves. Not because the people who built here were wrong about the potential. Because the coast kept changing the terms of the agreement. St. Mark's, Deckle Beach, Keaton Beach, a string of small settlements along the Big Bend coast, each established, each devastated by storm surge, each rebuilt in diminished form. The pattern is consistent. The lesson is the same. The Big Bend is a hurricane funnel. Its geography collects storm surge from the Gulf and concentrates it in a way that flat, low coastlines cannot withstand. Hurricane Idalia in 2023 produced a storm surge of over 4 meters along the Big Bend coastline in a region with almost no permanent population left to lose. The damage was recorded. The headlines lasted 2 days. Because there are no skyscrapers to photograph, no theme parks to close, no neighborhoods of $500,000 homes submerged on the news cycle, just the same coastline, doing what it has always done, resetting, quietly, without apology. The communities that remain here do not describe themselves as survivors of nature. They describe themselves as people who made a different calculation, who decided that what this coast offers in solitude and wildness is worth what it costs in security. They are not wrong, but they are also not many. The Big Bend has no deep water ports, no natural harbors large enough for commercial shipping. In the 19th century, commerce followed navigable water. No navigable water meant no permanent economic foundation. Every settlement built here was built on hope, not logistics, and the logistics always won. There is a word geographers use for coastlines like this one: inhospitable. It sounds like a judgment. It is not. It is a description of a relationship between a piece of land and the civilization that looked at it, calculated the cost, and quietly decided to build somewhere else. The Big Bend was not forgotten. It was assessed, and the assessment was the same every time. We have mapped every square meter of this planet. We have drained swamps, bridged canyons, and built cities in deserts. We have put a highway through the Amazon and a railroad across Siberia. And in the middle of the most developed nation in the history of civilization, in the state that adds 1,000 new residents every day, there is a piece of land that looked at all of that and said no. Not because we haven't tried, because the ground dissolves what we build. The water reroutes around our drainage. The mosquitoes outlast our repellent. The hurricanes reset our progress every decade. The land here does not need us. It has made that clear, repeatedly, for 200 years. There is something worth sitting with in that fact. We live in a civilization that has treated every obstacle as a problem to be engineered away. The Everglades themselves, the broader system of which the Big Bend is a northern edge, were once the target of one of the most ambitious drainage projects in American history. In the early 20th century, the US government spent decades and hundreds of millions of dollars attempting to drain them, to convert them into farmland, to make them useful. It partially worked, and the consequences: collapsed fisheries, saltwater intrusion into the drinking water supply of 4 million people, the near extinction of the Florida panther, the destabilization of the entire South Florida water cycle, are still being corrected today, at a cost so far of over $20 billion. The lesson the Big Bend offers is not that nature always wins. It is that nature keeps a longer ledger than we do. Every dollar spent conquering this coastline has eventually been followed by $2 spent on the consequences. The land does not resist development out of stubbornness. It resists it because the physics here were never on our side, and the physics do not negotiate. What remains, this black gap on the satellite map, this void in the middle of the most developed coastline in the world, is not a failure of imagination. It is the one place where the accounting was done honestly, and the answer came back the same every time. Maybe that's the answer to the question. Nobody lives in this part of Florida. Because of all the land on the continent, this is the one piece that has not yet been convinced it should. If you want more dark geography, more places where the map tells you one thing and the ground tells you another, subscribe and we'll take you somewhere else next time. Where should we go? Leave a suggestion in the comments.